First things first, how are you?
Doing very well here.
That's very good to hear. Now, to start, I want I'm not very familiar with the Ozark region, and you grew up in Missouri. What is
Yeah.
your fondest musical memory of growing up there?
My fondest musical memory, I'd say probably it was, just being around like there was music so much in my family, so everyone played and sang, so there'd be my mom played guitar, my my grandmother and I and my aunt played piano, so there was always
Mhm.
just a lot of music around, just a comfort with, I guess, some level of expression, just sometimes a lot of people could be just nervous to sing. But I think in my family it was I don't know mean like anyone was pushed into it or expected to, it was just a
Sure.
part of it. So you'd just try it, you'd sing and you'd sing a harmony. So I think just some of my memories of just being with my family. Sitting around a piano and a guitar and singing songs, from like church, from being in church at a young age until, celebrating holidays and just like people would come over and, there'd just be, that would be part of the entertainment would just be like singing together, it's kind of an old thing, really. Um, but very much a part of our DNA, people have been coming over to people's houses and singing songs or songs like in pubs, you
Mm.
know, known across countries, so I mean it's just such a uniting thing to express. And yeah, it's just been an I'd say those are the kind of earliest is just being with the family and the simple fact that anyone could do it.
How do you look back now then of growing up there? Because this is a theme that's kind of that goes throughout the entire album, but this notion of kind of wanting to get out of there or wanting to see the wider world, but also maybe coming back at some point, and all those thoughts. And I have a similar thought because I now live in my hometown again, and after living in
Okay.
Amsterdam and all that stuff. So those thoughts of wanting to move away, wanting to explore the world, but then also realizing what you had back there and all that stuff. How did that kind of influence the writing of this record?
Well, I mean, I think you hit something there well, Robin, where I think, you start off and if you have a similar path as I did, which I think a lot of us, and trying to explore the arts and this other
Mm,
alternative world that maybe wasn't our parents' world or something. Um, but you get out of the small town and you go to the cities and you do all this stuff to find yourself or find more of yourself or fill a part of that place. And I think it's that exposure and doing that that's so fulfilling. I mean, look, now you're doing what you wanted with art and commentary on it. Like I'm making songs and I get to
sure.
talk to cool people and interesting people from all over the world. And I'm gonna come over there and play some shows at some point. It's just all this cool stuff. Um, but during that time and that distance, when you reflect, I'm thinking you grow to appreciate the foundation that you had, your family. Um, that's what's so cool. Even in Holland and definitely in the States, but in Holland and in any country that I've been to, it's just like there are different regions,
Mm,
and you could look at that as like, oh, these guys are like this, or they, they like mustard and their hot dog, and they like ketchup. Um, but it's deeper than that, and it's just
mm,
people, and it's just
sure.
how people grow. And so I think that as I get older, maybe you have the same reflection where it's like I'm so proud of having that foundation and then having also that drive to go to the cities and go do that stuff. But then I also now have such a deep appreciation that a big part of me is that it's the Ozarks.
Mm.
Um, that's where I came from, and I'm proud of that.
Is that how would you? Because obviously Ozarks got kind of somewhat of a boost in fame because of the TV show. I've never seen it, but for somebody who's never been there, how would you describe the area, and kind of what was your childhood like? Was it just a regular Midwestern kind of upbringing?
Yeah, I mean, it's the Ozarks are just like a beautiful kind of space there in southern and southwest Missouri. Just we have what they call the Ozark Mountains, which is kind of
Right.
rolling hills, you know. So it's just really beautiful landscape, and there's so much music culture in the heart of the Ozarks. You know, like people are familiar with Branson, and that has become a phenomenon for sure over the years. But um, you know, they used to have the Ozark Opry
Mm.
in Springfield, Missouri, which was the precursor to the Grand Ole Opry. It was the
Okay.
first syndicated on television in the 50s, a country variety show. So, you know, I was talking to my grandmother a few months back, and she had gone to Springfield and went to a few of those shows. Um, so there is just a lot of music and a lot of culture there. Um, you know, I think that a lot of that area kind of heralds itself as some of the early spots of kind of pioneer days of
Mm.
America, when all that when you know Ohio and all the Midwest was just full of woods, you know, and some of those places haven't really changed that much,
Okay.
you know. Um, Really, it's still a lot of agricultural and farmland kind of spaces. I mean, we really lived in the country, you know. I mean, we didn't. I never really lived in a city until I got older, and it's you know it's not like Europe where it's like you know there might be towns that people haven't heard of, but they're very populated cities, and you're just going through Holland and just Amsterdam, Utrecht. You know, there are all these cities,
Sure.
and um, kind of like the East Coast is sort of like that for us. But you know, in the Midwest and in Missouri, there's still a lot of space that you know. I think that's what a lot of
Right.
Europeans when they come to the States, they like to you know to drive around it because it's just kind of a crazy concept how massive it is, you know, and how empty it is, or in some spaces. So I think that yeah, there's just a lot of you get the seasons in the Ozarks. You get real drastic and dramatic like fall and winter and snow and you know, so you get
Mm.
all that. Um, but you know, I think that and now you know I live in Texas. I live out in the country, so that was
Sure.
all inspired. You know, I didn't move back, but I moved here, and I had my parents move down, and they live on the land. My wife's parents live on the land, so we're just out in the country um, with our family, and kind of growing a new chapter with our daughter.
Mm.
And so this, you know, maybe, and she's like playing music, and she's a big Pixies fan.
Okay.
She's like, I got the drums. She's been playing. She's a big into drums lately. But you know, maybe she'll write a record, and it'll be about where she came from. And
Right.
so I think that's probably the bigger statement to me is you know that this is a record full of like the stories of my life and that came from the past. And I think that's what's kind of cool is that you know, like one of the Ozarker song is about my great grandparents. So
Mm.
something over 100 years ago of people that I never met um, affect me, and I get to tell their story, which is a part of my story. And I've been telling you know fans and when I play is that when we tell our stories, all of us tell our stories to our young ones and these next generations, that's what connects us in a human way to the past, to the now, to the future. And that stuff just always fascinates me and is an inspiration to write with those kind of thoughts, you know.
Yeah, was there a reason why you started thinking about kind of the roots and the
Yeah,
connection and the lineage and everything that happened? And obviously we were in a lockdown and there was a lot of reflection going on, I think, in those
yeah,
years. But how did you arrive at the started, or how did you kind of started to take stock of your life and look at kind of
yeah,
like you say you're a parent
yeah,
now?
yeah. It was a good. Yeah, we had some time to do that for sure, Robin, didn't we? Um,
I don't know if I figured it out though.
No, I definitely didn't. I'm like, even today, I'm like, did I, what did I, have I haven't figured it out. Definitely know that. um, but yeah, I mean, for me, like when I make a record, it's like, there's a lot of inspiration in there, but I'm not just like waiting around to make a record. So it's like I'm in the studio right now. So it's like, I've got a space that conjures up like,
Mm.
oh, I'm gonna make a record. I'm gonna make a song. So a lot of times when I'm just generally just working, it's just like I have a few seeds planted in my head of something like, oh, that'd be a cool record to make, you know?
Mm.
I don't know if like filmmakers do stuff that, or that'd be a cool movie to make. I kind of feel like I think in movie terms almost, but like,
Okay.
but I'll have these ideas like, oh, that'd be a cool record to make. This fill in the blank, and I was just kind of kept on going back to like, just missing Tom Petty. I was just like some of our heroes that have passed. Um, like Tom Petty is just one that I think about more often. Um, and and I just started thinking about like, man, no one like I've never ever met someone who didn't like Tom Petty, or I just, and that's really saying something. I feel like, I mean, you could, everyone can have a lot of opinion on stuff, but I've just never heard anyone knock Tom Petty. And there's something that was like so simple about those songs and straightforward, but complex.
Mm.
And I guess I kept on going back to that seed where I was like, man, it'd be kind of cool to just make like a record like, Damn the Torpedoes, or you know, just there was that certain time I think in the mid late 80s of rock and roll where it was like still really powerful and
Mm.
cool, really cool sounds. But the themes of like Tom Petty and kind of a straightforward punch with words and lyrics and stuff. And I was like, man, that'd be kind of cool to make a record like that. And because I think a lot of my writing is, and I think that's the point of writing is being challenged. It's like
Mm.
because it's like you know one of my second album, Barn Doors and Concrete Floors, which was really popular in your country. Um, but a lot of the fans that I have aren't as familiar with that record when it came out. They're
Sure.
familiar with Rain Plans, but those are two examples of just like Barn Doors was kind of more straightforward, kind of stonesy garage, like in a and then Rain Plans was this more ethereal kind of atmospheric record. Um, but as an artist, I just want to be able to go a lot of places. So I just want to challenge myself. So I was just like thinking about this petty stuff, and then I just slowly started just listening to a little more like rock from that era than I normally do, So like
Okay.
listen a little more to the Boss, and some Born in the USA, and um listening to like Bob Seger, which I've always just loved
Sure.
Bob Seger and just feel like he's such an underrated sort of songwriter in the genre, but I mean just timeless records and songs. And all those guys had that kind of heartland thing, they were from the smaller
Right.
spaces and states and stuff. So I just started listening to that kind of stuff, and that stuff just starts to seep in, and then you're just like when you pick up a guitar or go to a piano, there's just that energy, that music, all that stuff just kind of soaks in. So um I was like, I kind of want to make this record, and what am I going to sing about? Well, I'm a guy from this small state, this you know the country and these spaces that are kind of like the every people, really. um People that we might say, just they're not in Amsterdam. They just have
Mm.
a different lifestyle. Like my grandparents, a lot of that family of just getting up and taking care of the cattle and coming back, just a different lifestyle, and a simpler kind of life in the country. But there's just a lot of people are working people, and just the everyman, and I think there was something kind of beautiful in that music, that it was for everyone. That
Mm.
you know the boss might have been singing for some of the union folks, but he could go play in the middle of somewhere and could go to the city. Music's for everyone ultimately. But those guys were pretty proud of their history. So I think thinking in that and kind of getting myself around that music was like, well, I'm that guy. Like, what are my stories? What about my people before me here? And then that just kind of triggered like all those just stories you remember hearing growing up, the photo albums and stuff, and talking to my mom and kind of getting more about those stories a little deeper, so I could kind of have enough to grasp and write songs. And then that just became kind of the roadmap, I guess. I just had these stories, and some stories are like other things that are passed on or a friend,
Mm.
but they're not all about Ozarker and the past or
Sure.
something. But they all kind of hit on these kind of spirits of things that I've learned over the years from that place, and going to New York City and living there, and going into the world and playing all over the world, and moving to Texas and building a ranch and living in the country, and just kind of having the pandemic and this full
Sure.
circle of here I am back in the country just like I always was. And yeah, so I think I just surrounded myself with that and just kind of kept finding songs and that.
But I can imagine, because a song like "Can't Stop," it kind of, you mentioned the boss, and it reminded me of the sentiment, at least, of Thunder Road or something. Did you have that urge to get out of there initially, and then in Lost in America, you speak about getting off the grid and going back to the country. So is that kind of somewhat autobiographical, that first wanting to get out, and then now obviously you've been living in Texas for a little bit, but.
Yeah. No, I mean, to me, it's the duality. To
Mm.
me, as I get older too, it's less about like, one thing, and it's more about the things change. And there are times I want to be out there and be like
Mm.
gunning and running. Um, and there are times I just want to be in the arms of the country where it's just so
Sure.
peaceful and it's just my family, and it's quiet and time moves differently
Mm.
and the day is long and I can do such varied stuff. I don't, I think when I was younger, I mean, what do you think when you're, 15 years old or something about what a rock and roll guy does I mean, do they write songs all day? Are they making hit albums constantly? Are they on the road I mean, the day is just long, and it's like, I've got enough music to release for the next couple of years, and I think that process is not me.
Okay.
I don't have to. I don't have to write and record every day. I couldn't even do that. I couldn't release that much. Is what my point is so that I like to have a balance of life, where I'm just like working in the studio, or where the weather's finally been nice in Texas. It's just very hot all summer, um, and it just calmed down in the last couple of weeks. So you can kind of be outside and do ranch work, run a chainsaw, and just you know just have this varied stuff where you can kind of come back to the studio with kind of fresh
Mm.
ears and ideas. So yeah, I mean, I think the Can't Stop is definitely about, it's either about that you can't stop, that you're moving forward, or that it's your spinning your wheels. I guess it's for everyone to decide. But
Mm.
and then Lost in America has that. It's an interesting thing because I love being in the country, like we've spoken about so much. But that story is about this story that was passed along in my family. And so my middle name is Nash,
Mm.
and I go by Israel Nash, and I was named after an old family friend. My mom was the youngest of seven. She had six
Okay.
older brothers, so her brothers were quite a bit older, and they'd pick on her, um and they had one of their family friends, one of their brother's friends was Miller, Nash Nash A. Miller, and
Okay.
he 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 was just like sweet to her and friendly. He was athletic, good looking guy, popular, and she would tell me the story that he went to Vietnam and he came back,
Mm.
and when the screen door would slam on a summer day, that he would hit the ground.
Oh wow.
And I just remember that story. And so I actually was like, hey, what I I wanted to write a song about it. So I just thought, like I wanted to get more research and kind of understand it more. So I was like, hey, I wanted to know more about that story. And she sent me an article from Time magazine from early '90s and titled Lost in America.
Mm.
And it was this story of, so this guy's name is Nash A. Miller and his nickname was Nam,
Oh, right.
Nam,
Wow.
right? So he was drafted. He fought over there for a couple of years on a gunner ship.
Mm.
They caught missile fire, and he had like shrapnel, and it
Wow.
almost hit his jugular, and still had the scars. Uh, and anyway, he was discharged. He moved back home, and that's kind of like the part that I knew, that he was back home, but I didn't know what happened next. But so he just couldn't find a job and like settle in, and had post traumatic stress, and they
Mm.
did not have such support for all this, and because it was also just such a brutal war, and just like a terrorizing war, because it wasn't a traditional battlefield. It was just, so
Yeah.
he ended up, this is what the story revealed, which was crazy, is that he ended up moving to Hawaii and living in the jungle off the grid in a tent.
Oh wow.
And 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 then in this interview, there are a number of these veterans from Vietnam that did this, and they call them
Mm.
Bushmen. And so Nash wasn't the only one, but he lived there, you know, for over 20 some years, and he committed suicide and drove his Jeep off of a cliff there in the late '90s. Um, and it just changed. I thought the story was already, something I wanted to write about. Just a story that I remember, and it has my name in it. Just represents what I'm talking about, of these people that you don't even know that are connected to you, and how do you tell
Mm.
their stories to connect to the future. So yeah, so it just kind of changed the dynamic of that story, and that he was just living. And there's some. I could send you that article. It's such a good article, and it just kind of help put in perspective that song. So I try to tell that song in the chapters, where it's like the first verse is him returning, and it's
Right.
the story that I remember, this every time the screen door slams. And then the next verse goes in this chorus, and it goes to the next verse, which is talking about war, being there, drafted, and trying to forget the stuff that he did. And then the very last verse is him him being back and finally accepting that
Mm.
he's going to go live in the jungle. And that was a part that my mom had told me, that like his brother, he had a little brother, Ron, that looked up to him so much. And so that line was like a really critical one to me, where it's like my brother Ron looked up to me. Now he comes by the apartment twice a week just to make sure that I'm doing okay.
Mm.
um and then that's his split to go to the jungle. So yeah, that became just a really very powerful song. And I've been playing it the last like 8 months here and there, and telling the story. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with these songs when I'm playing them live and talking to fans, is to inform them, tell them the story. And because I think there's a tendency for us to be like, well, let everyone just interpret their own story. But I think the beauty of these songs are that these stories are maybe unique to me, but they're common stories.
Sure.
We all have family members or family friends or some old stuff that describes something about who we are, and um, so yeah, it's just been a powerful song to play and connect with people, really.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. Especially that line, because I mentioned I moved back to my hometown. That line, where is it? Feeling a little lost in a place I know. I feel that sometimes when I walk around my kind of hometown, because
Yeah.
I've been away for so long, and that obviously not to the extent of that story, of course, but I do feel
Yes.
that sometimes.
It's like, have you changed? Like, because you don't feel like
Yeah.
you've changed that much, or you feel like your change is so documented in your mind, but yeah, who are you? It's the old can you step in the same river twice?
But it's kind of what you mentioned as well. That you yourself ending up back kind of in the country. I sometimes think, so was it inevitable that I would at some point return, or could there have been some story where I lived in Amsterdam or even moved to the States at some point or something? I find that interesting to think about. Um,
Yeah, that is interesting. I did see. I got to tell you something. I did see this cool diagram that I was showing my wife and my daughter the other day, and it was just like a point like where you're born, and then all these paths, but there's a straight line, and then the line is now, because you could have taken all these paths, but you've had a map that's gone this line from when you were born, and then tomorrow are all those forks again. You
right.
know, where do you go? What do you want to do?
But
Um,
that's an interesting point, because that's, are you very much, because you talk about making connections with people and then those kind of things, are you very much in the moment then whenever you perform live? And yeah, how should I put this? Is it really trying to create a moment, even, or trying to create that, even if it's just for a fleeting moment, just that connection with somebody? That, I mean, everybody's experienced that when you hear a song or something, and for some reason it kind of, you have a reaction to it.
oh yeah, I mean, it's just so powerful, and I'm like, I'm not like a. It's tough to explain to me. It's like I want to create a show, like the set list. I want there to be a play, like 3 acts, and I want there to be an arc,
Mm,
and I want the band when we get ready for a tour, it's so really rehearsed, to really be on spot, because for me to be comfortable, I want to know that everything's going to work really really well, um so then to me, it's that comfort allows me to kind of just be completely just in that moment. And I think that's the beauty of creating art anyway, is just that you're not thinking about the whole world outside of you, you're just thinking on
right.
this in this little small space, really. um so that's just really important to me, just talking to fans afterwards, like that's important to them too. And it's hard to kind of communicate exactly what that is. I'm not trying to call it some massive spiritual catharsis, but it is to some, and to have a space when people, that's just powerful in our DNA, no matter how cool our
Sure.
iPhone 15 and our Zoom, updates are, is that like people coming together in person, being unified in something, is really just powerful, and it's just medicine to the soul. Like we have there's, like, I did these pop-up shows in
Mm,
August that we had tried to do, that I just wanted to get off the ground and just try them. And we only did 20 tickets, and we had this Amsterdam show. And if you meet anyone that went to that show, you should talk to them and ask them about it. Because it was no microphone. I was telling some of these stories, and I really pushed people to tell me their stories, and people were
mm,
standing up telling stories. And there was a man that he told his story finally, and that his son was uh, was sick with cancer, was going to be passing, had a short time to live,
right.
um, and he wanted to go travel to the States, while he was still in good health. and they listened to my music the whole time, traveling all
Wow.
over the States. And that his son had since passed. This was in 2018, and he goes back every year and drives his motorcycle across in the desert, listening to Israel Nash records. Um, so yeah, at one level, I don't want to be like too spiritual, but that's
Yeah.
just and to be just a small part of that, is just, and to be able to connect with that, it makes sense out of life that doesn't make sense.
Mm. And I think that the way you described that a show like that is kind of similar to the way you described you growing up and with your family making music, where it's very, very much authentic and real, and there's no purpose behind it. It's just being in the moment with the people that you're around. So I find that very beautiful. I do have one last question, because and this is more a musical question, because what I find when I listen to especially this album, the balance you strike between kind of modern textures, and there's some synthy loops, and or
Yeah.
in where's it in Fire Dance, there's that descending piano in the background.
Oh,
those
that
those
end is
yeah.
so. Oh, I love it.
No, but those little textures and elements, and then it's still very much Americana, and you hear the guitars and everything. But to kind of figure out what that musical landscape should be, what goes into that?
Um, I I guess I just think it's being like super open to what just sounds cool and
Mm,
good, and kind of talking about, like, I mean, when you think about like Bruce Springsteen and his band, like when they brought like the CS 80, that
right.
keyboard, that synth, that kind of changed the sound of like a lot of the half of Born in the USA. So, and there's a lot of Americana when you listen to that record
Sure.
back. So I just feel like Americana rock was always taking these little things from other spaces and other genres. So to me, that's what's the beauty of it is these days, is that we have so much more access to some of those sounds, and
Sure.
so we can play with them more. And like, it used to be just kind of be like, well, hey, a CS 80 keyboard is like $70,000 maybe right now. It's massive. I mean, what if you're only limited to being able to play that if you went to a studio that had it, or you had an extra $70,000 laying around for a synth? um,
And even in the
and
studio,
that,
you'd have to pay thousands of dollars to rent it for the day.
yeah.
So
So now I've got like a Arturia plug-in. It's
mhm.
$150, and everyone that comes in is like, "That sounds great," and it's like, and it's less about the authentic thing about, is this a real one, and it's more about, how does it make you feel, and isn't it cool that we can get so close to it, and I feel like that, and I feel like I'm getting close to, you know, that. So to me, it's just about bringing in sound and not really having that many rules, where this isn't just like 1972 rock and roll band rules. It's just like, oh, you got a cool pedal, let's hear it.
No, but
Let's make
that's
sounds.
what I like as well, because you give ample room for a guitar solo, so that's a good balance,
Yeah.
I think, and I really like
Yes,
that in this type of music. I like when the solo kicks in, because sometimes you kind of expect one to come in and it doesn't, and that's really
I know. I'm Israel Nash loves the guitar solos still. I will not let that go. I still love the big outro at the end of the song, and it takes off. This record is honestly probably I think it's my best like bridge work. The
Mm,
bridges in these songs are like songs within songs. I really wanted to make these powerful bridges, because a little songwriter trick is, the real thing about a bridge is, if it's good enough, and the Beatles did a lot of bridges, but like, if it's good enough, the ear gets tricked and you're into this new song, and then you get the gift of that chorus, and that's emotion, that adds something. So these songs have this cinematic flow that I was really,
sure.
despite there might be themes that are for everyone and kind of like more like straightforward with lyrics, but they should be stirring in emotive ways, and I think that these songs really unlock that. So I really worked hard on that, and kind of honing that writing in for that.
That's awesome to hear. Israel, man, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me, and good luck with everything that's coming up with the release and going back on the road.
Great. Peace. Take care, Robin. See you later, brother.